Let's see. All right. We is live.
Cool. So what first?
Let's talk about your thing first, since it's Octoberish, it's Halloween, it's spooky season, as I'm seeing all over my Facebook feed.
Point. All right. So some of my students a couple of times have been talking about horror movies. The sense of delight. And well, what? Okay.
No, keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay.
I'm like,
Okay. So I think there's different kinds of horror movies. You know,
yeah, I think
some of
the
them. Well, go ahead.
actually I might. Well, no. Maybe later. I might want to pick your brain on because the other. I was actually when you had said this, I kind of dropped it to some of the students at lunch, and we were
Mm,
talking about some things that I could bring, but I don't know that I know how to really define the horror. Like I don't know that I know what counts for me as a true horror film. Because like for me, I'll cut off the satanic, like the Conjuring and the stuff that's clearly just demonic, and I don't go near that. But then there's like the slasher, Friday the 13th, the Halloween,
Scream.
yeah, Scream, and it's like
Yeah.
those I kind of enjoy, but I don't know that I count that as like horror. I
Yeah, and then take something
like
like
it's
Zodiac,
yeah,
right?
right.
Not
It's
Zodiac. Was it Zodiac? No, it's seven. Seven.
oh yeah, like
You
that, and
know?
then you've got the psychological thriller or the
Yeah,
suspense, and like is that horror? I'm not like Silence of the Lambs. Is that a
yeah,
horror?
yeah.
Like, but
Right.
like that doesn't seem to be
And
horror
yeah, and
so
there's
much
that
as psychological suspense, right?
there's that ambiguous genre called thriller that
Yeah,
just
right.
seems like people just drop that title on anything. It doesn't fit anywhere else.
And that's
I
the
don't
like
know.
I'm so yeah. Even talking about horror movies, I'm not even sure I don't know what I would put in that genre first, but
Yeah, and I wish I could remember examples of what my students were giving, but I don't. But
what do you think of when you
it just
think
really
of
got me thinking about it. What I think of horror, like pure horror movies. Well, there's different kinds, like I was saying. Yeah, I think the slasher film is one sort.
okay,
There's not like necessarily jump scares, but like I remember, I dated a girl once who really liked horror movies. So maybe that's biasing my opinion of it. But I remember one movie I watched with her was called The Collector, and it was literally just a slasher horror movie. It wasn't even like Saw. Saw, at least in the beginning, had like a couple of questions like, "What's a life worth?"
hmm.
You know. Um, but the collector was just like a serial killer who kills people in this brutal, slow way by slowly booby trapping their house until they just are murdered somehow. And I just remember like awful
I
things
don't
like
yeah, I don't know that.
he put a nail in the earpiece of the phone so that when they went to go call for help, they stuck the nail in their ear. You know, little things like that, all the way up to enormous like spikes and stuff like that. So, but
Right, gotcha.
what was scary about that film? Oh yeah, and like animals or bugs like eating somebody while he watched. Um, what's that's not like horror as much as it is grotesque.
Yeah,
Um, there was nothing like I guess maybe it taps into fear if you're worried that the person's going to get collected by the collector, or killed by the serial killer in Scream or by Freddy or whatever.
hmm.
I guess that's fear, but fear can appear in so many genres that I would hate to define a genre of film based on fear. Maybe that's where the horror genre sort of is too
I was gonna say that.
ambiguous.
Okay, because I was gonna. That seems to be, if there was such a thing, like that's the ratio of the horror genre is to try and elicit the sense of fear.
Yeah, but how's that different from tragic fear,
Hmm.
right? The fear that Aristotle talks about in the Poetics.
Hmm.
Because there's fear that the character is going to suffer some tragic fate. And it's not scary in the sense that like
Hmm.
my heart is racing and I'm going to jump in my seat, or I'm going to have thoughts as I'm trying to go to sleep about what's under my bed. Um, those distinct fears that cut beyond film, cut beyond the film experience seems to be what the horror genre is about. Whereas Aristotle praised the fear it felt in the theater precisely because, if I understand correctly, uh, you did not take it with you, right? You could
Hmm.
delight in the passion of enjoying the show, and that was it. right?
Mm,
It wasn't some enduring thing. Whereas I think horror movies, and I think the more I think about this, the more I think this is right, are designed so that you re-encounter that fear outside
mhm,
the film.
mm,
You know, they try to take something ordinary and make it terrifying. The
mm,
woods, the dark, the water,
mhm,
um, yeah, things like that, right?
mm.
Is that a good
Right.
thing?
Hmm.
Is that something worth delighting in? Feeling, yeah, it can't be, right? Because feeling fear where there's nothing to be afraid of can't be good.
So I want to make a distinction, but I don't know that I have real grounds for it. So there's what I'm kind of vaguely thinking is there something that the oh my goodness, yeah, because there's no grounds, I'm struggling with it. There's a difference, I would say, right? If you're simply feeling fear when there is nothing to be afraid of, then yeah, right, we would say, all right, something like one of the passions is out of whack.
Hmm.
But the whole point of the tragedy or of whatever genre of movie is in a certain sort of mental encounter to give you the something to be afraid of that you can kind of you feel that passion as if it were present to you, but only like there and then.
Well, it's realistically simulated there, right?
Yeah, but
Um,
so it seems like there's the intention is to like is to
Extend the
give you the
simulation
well,
outside into the real
it's
world.
it depends then on what genre of horror you're talking. If it's just like in the tragedy where you're afraid for the hero, but then that's the end of it, then it seems like there is something to fear in that moment, right?
Yes.
You have that attachment to the hero, and okay, for like that, all right. It seems like there actually would be something to be afraid of, like
Hmm.
in a certain respect, in that moment.
Hmm.
Yeah, if you want to talk about the more slasher horror, like the horror kind of thing, where they want to make you afraid of the woods or the water or whatever. Yeah, maybe there does seem to be something.
Because in a way, like it's tapping into something real. Like I think this is
Yeah, that's.
my counter example to this, and something I kind of like is
Ooh.
H.P. Lovecraft.
I was just thinking about that. So you're all right.
I kind of like him, but I kind of hate him. Like I really hesitate to recommend him to anybody because I think that he was probably a demonically afflicted man.
Hmm.
Um, but like the fear that he taps into, and the reason it was so well taken, or at least why he's become so well known, is right the fear of the unknown,
Hmm.
which is in a way a fearful thing in itself. He's sort of
Yeah.
just drawing attention to it,
Hmm.
right? Now
Yeah.
he does sort of populate the unknown with fearsome things, but it's really just his way of saying you actually don't know that this
Yeah.
isn't here. You know, he's not suggesting to anybody that Nyarlathotep really exists, or that there's not some dark god that's worshipped in a dark pagan forest that could actually harm people.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I think his yeah. If it wasn't so demonic, which it really does seem that way when I'm like that's the closest parallel to the sorts of things you remember that audiobook we listened to, The Thing on the Doorstep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a great story. Like
It was tight. I liked it.
yeah, it's just so well done, well written. But like it's about a demonic character that
Oh,
possesses people
it
over,
was messed up. Yeah. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
it's messed up. But maybe that's not as bad. And this is maybe why, well, this is a good question. Would exorcism films be the same sort of way? Because in a way, like there should be a certain fear associated with the demonic in the sense that you estimate it correctly,
Hmm.
right? Not in the sense that you think that you're defenseless or that God's going to abandon you to it. You know, you should be able to keep that all that in mind. And a good exorcism movie will end in some sort of victory.
Hmm.
Um, so let's just say we're talking about the good ones. Um, Maybe there's not something evil about that, but I don't know. The Exorcist film, the original one, is an awful movie. Like, it's just evil. I don't know. Do you think? Maybe I was too young when I watched it, but I wasn't young. I don't want to watch it again though. I have no desire to whatsoever.
Yeah, I
Like I would leave
probably
the room if other people were watching. I'm like, I just don't
yeah.
want to see it. You know.
In part, I think because it was, from what I've been given to understand by other priests, some of whom have had to deal with stuff like that. Uh, Certainly, they say that as far as like the language and stuff, that movie is pretty accurate. They would say the one I hear the most about is the Emily Rose as being like the most
Mm-hmm.
more like the accurate. It's like if so like between those two, they say that's just a pretty decent description of what goes on. Are you asking then what do I think about people watching that?
Yeah, I'm wondering like how does that stack up next to H.P. Lovecraft
Yeah.
and the
So
slasher movies, or just movies that are like The Ring? You
yeah.
know.
So the only all right, so the more general way I think about it, and this is maybe where I'll start and I don't know, see where we end up, right? Um it sort of seems when you're talking about what your passion, like what you take delight in, like
Mm-hmm.
there are certain kinds of like I think like scary things that like I really love drop roller coaster, not roller
Oh
coaster. You
yeah,
know what I'm
yeah,
talking about, like the drop thing, right?
yeah.
And
Like the
there's
Tower of Terror.
like Tower of Terror. There's something kind of scary about that. And
Mm-hmm.
even when they're playing, back when there was the Tower of Terror, right? And they play the film for you about the haunted, and like right before you drop, like the hologram, the ghosts show up, and they're like, "Get out!" And then the door shut, boom, you drop, right? And you're like, ah, but then you're like, man, that was so cool, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
was awesome. But it seems like if you have to, I guess you would have to ask yourself, why is it that you take delight in certain things? You know,
Well, hang on. Isn't this a different example? Because you
it
don't
kind of
take the
is.
Tower of
That's
Terror
my
with
point.
you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you
that's my
leave it.
point. I'm trying to. That's the point I'm trying to get to, right?
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
have a middle example of. I think we've kind of talked about this before. Like like when I watch Taken and like Liam Neeson is just killing everybody, and I'm like, yes, absolutely, right? Like I love that
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's like, well, is there something like why am I taking pleasure in like something that I would never condone in real life, right?
Well, could we justify it? Because it's well, no, you can't.
Yeah, right.
I was gonna try, but
Or like
you
when
can't.
you're watching James Bond and he gets the girl out of wedlock, and you're just like, yes, right. Even
Well,
though like in real life you would be like, no, like I understand that this is morally wrong, and I wouldn't, I wouldn't condone this.
yeah.
But all right, and then so then now pulling ourselves here, right? I kind of wonder if, and I was thinking about this the other day. I put it up on my Facebook page because I saw they were having some sort of like witchcraft cocktail thing back in New Orleans for the month of October, and it's like it's probably I can't be the only one that's noticing that as Christianity declines, you have the rise of occultism, the interest in witchcraft and crystals and all this other whatever else people do. Right?
Mhm.
So all right, why it's when you go to so like the haunted industry, it's huge in New Orleans, right? All the old cemeteries, the haunted old buildings, blah blah blah, right? It actually seems like, and I would kind of, it seems like there would be a problem, right? If you go there seeking after like manifestations of the supernatural, like that's a good place to put yourself in exposure to the demonic, right? Like that doesn't seem okay. If you're going after like the horror movies or the exorcism movies because there's some sort of like attachment to this, that seems to be a problem, right? If you're watching, like I've seen The Exorcist, I'm kind of with you. It's not that I wouldn't see it again. I don't watch it regularly or even close enough in the span of a couple years to be considered regularly. Emily Rose, like I would see it again, but I don't watch it. Right? It's not on my playlist or anything like that. I don't seek that kind of thing out. Sometimes it's helpful to be reminded of that reality, right?
Mhm.
That should scare, right? When you talk about scaring the hell out of somebody, if you take that literally, that can be a good thing.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
But
but
some
I
people
think,
seek it.
yeah, and
Uh,
I would say that's probably a problem, right? Like if the attachment is toward that sort of like the sickness, the twistedness of it, right? Like even to a certain extent, we were talking like, I like seeing Jason murder a couple teenagers as much as the next guy, and it's like maybe there's something off about that, right?
Hmm.
I only watch the Halloween movies, of course, just once a year during October because I don't know, it seems like the appropriate time to do it. But
Yeah, I mean, I
oh,
don't know.
and
I
even
could.
this, I don't know. Are you old enough to have remembered Are You Afraid of the Dark? Was
I've
this
never.
this
Don't know
was
what you're
before
talking
your
about.
time? So when I was growing up, so yeah, this would have been a long time ago. Saturday night Nickelodeon, and they had a number. It was Clarissa Explains It All. There was a number of other shows, whatever. But one that came on like kind of in the middle, right, 8:30 or so, was this Are You Afraid of the Dark? Even now, I've gone back as an adult and watched some of those again, and I was like, man, I can't believe they let kids watch this. Like some of these are pretty good, pretty well done, scary stories, right?
Hmm.
And but even as a kid, I remember like there was something of like the thrill, right, where you get scared, but then you realize, oh, there's nothing to actually be afraid about, and you're kind of you get the adrenaline rush. And I would want to, I guess, and what I'm trying to work towards, maybe, right, is there something to be said about the reason for your seeking this out? Like if the attachment is to the demonic per se, or like to the horror per se, like that's your personality. I don't know. Something about that seems off.
Yeah.
Could there be a legitimate like entertainment value? Like I kind of want to say yes, but I don't know if that's just rationalization or not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've been
and that's what
rambling for a
I'm
bit.
wondering if my side is rationalization because I take like no delight in horror movies as such. But maybe that's because I'm not like other people, and I like take those images and things with me, whereas maybe other people are able to just leave them behind, and maybe they're because their imagination is just different or whatever. It
Hmm.
just doesn't this doesn't happen to them, and that's what I'm kind of wondering now is whether is it essentially connected with those films? Like, is the purpose of those films that you take it with you? Is that true?
Hmm. That's
I think that
interesting.
it is. I think that it
Hmm.
is. I think that the point of a lot of these films is to,
Just to take it with you? I don't know.
yeah,
Well,
like think about The Ring,
okay.
TVs. Right, The Ring was about TVs. It takes something ordinary and makes it something awful.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jaws is about the ocean. You know, I could take any number of examples that take something ordinary and makes it fearful when it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. I would say you should be afraid of great white sharks, but
well, you should estimate them correctly. Let's just say
yeah,
that, right? Which
yeah,
sometimes
sure.
includes fear. Um, but like you take like there's an actual measurable decline in going to the beach that coincides with the release of Jaws, right?
Yeah.
Um, so did the movie makers intend that? I don't know, but could the movie be ordered to anything else? Is anybody surprised at that effect? I don't think
Mm.
so. So there maybe there's another thing here. Like there's a question as to whether the movie's designed for that. There's the other question as to whether it's a materially inescapable consequence of it that the
Mm.
fear does find itself in the real world where it shouldn't be.
Hmm. I don't know. That's an interesting question. Because, like I said, when I've seen like the Halloween or the Friday the 13th, I don't know that I take that with. I don't know that I take that with me. Like those I can watch and like nothing. I don't think Jason is hiding behind the shower curtain or under my bed
You
or
don't, but aren't
whatever.
people like extra afraid right now of stalkers and serial killers? Like, not that they shouldn't be afraid of them in any way at all, but is do you
Yeah,
think
but
there's
I
a
wonder if
disproportionate fear because of our fascination with those sorts of films?
I actually would want to say yes to the one and but deny the what you're implying the cause might be, right? Like those
Okay.
have been like Jason, that's been around since what, 1979, 1980, whenever the first one came out, right? The whole like stalker serial killer, that's a very much contemporary sort of thing. Like the all the hype I'm hearing about it only seems to me at least that I've heard over the last couple of years. I don't remember having to
Horror movies,
used to
though.
have heard about this.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess Jason is like an old one. Scream is old.
Scream's
Things like
old.
that.
Now, sometimes the imagery sticks with me, but almost for comedic effect. Like when I was, my folks where they live in Florida, and they're in one of those like big communities, and they were taking me through like one of the constructions, and I was just as we were driving through one of the neighborhoods that was going up, there's like these woods that are right there by the house. And I was like, yeah, those are woods. Like when you look out your window and Jason is standing like next to that tree, like that tree right there. That's the one he's standing next
Yeah.
to. But it's like, but that was more of a comic thing for me. Not like
Yeah. Okay.
I don't look for now, but you are right. Like that's why I don't watch like the Exorcist movies or whatever pretty recently, because that kind of sticks with you. But I think there's more of a reason, like that's more grounded in reality, I think, than Jason is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even right, so something like Jason, since we're talking about him, right? Part of the thing that made him really scary is it's this big, lumbering, like he's not fast. He's not. The thing that was actually made him scary was the fact that he's unkillable, right? Like he's been shot, he's been stabbed, but he keeps. That's what's scary about it, right? It's this unstoppable kind of evil, right? I don't know if there's a difference. It's kind of
Did,
interesting.
did you ever watch that film, Paranormal Activity, the original one?
No, I know the film, but I haven't seen it.
That one is designed to make ordinary people in your house fearful.
Is that the one where like it shows like the found footage, whatever, of somebody like they're sleeping and like the bed sheet starts like
Yeah, yeah,
being
yeah.
tugged
But
out
like,
or whatever?
what ends up happening towards the end is like the girl starts doing things. Like this guy's wife or girlfriend, I don't remember, like gets out of the bed in the middle of the night, just stands beside him and looks at him for like hours, and then gets back in bed. And then like I think the movie ends when she gets out of bed one day, goes downstairs, a couple hours pass, and then there's a scream, and he runs out downstairs, and there's a smash, and then there's silence, and then there's slow steps up the stairs, and then she like comes in the room and like throws his body at the camera or something. I don't remember, but
Yeah,
it's designed to make you like worry about the person sleeping next to you.
I'm gonna go with the
Um,
fact that you are what 40% more likely to be killed by your spouse than by anybody else. I'm that you know.
but like to make you wonder that they're not them. Like that's what it is. Like if your spouse is somebody you should be afraid of, then be afraid of them. but uh, but like if they're a good normal person, it could be harmful to a
But
good
would you know
relationship.
that? Isn't that the thing? Wouldn't you like? How are you if you're sleeping? How are you ever going to know if this psycho person like is now just standing up and like just watching you like sleeping? You
But
ain't never going to know that.
but it would not happen, and that's why this is not a good fear to have, right?
I guess if you say so.
It's an irrational fear. Um, that would be.
Yeah, yeah, sure. In most cases you're right. Like that would be an irrational fear. Sure,
But that movie was designed, I think, to elicit precisely that sort of fear that lingers
mm,
beyond the film, no doubt in
yeah,
my mind. And that I think is not good.
yeah. Yeah. I think if what was I was gonna maybe draw back to something else. Then it seems about the general sickness of the culture, the fact that people like find that interesting or fascinating or that seek that out, right? It almost this actually might be disconnected, so I'll mention it, and if it's not relevant, we can move on. But I remember Father Z a couple years ago had mentioned like not necessarily in relation with the horror thing, but it's this general sickness of the culture that he called this ghoulish voyeurism, like where you want to know about everything, like all the sick
Okay.
twisted like all the sick twisted details of other people's life, like that it doesn't concern you.
Mm,
It's the phenomenon that's behind like rubbernecking on the highway. Like you see this god awful traffic accident in this crumpled car, and you kind of want to stop and look at it, don't you?
mm-hmm,
Right? You kind of want to see what horrors might be there, right?
mm-hmm.
And it's just like, but that's there. And his point is, but there's something wrong with that. There is something
Yeah,
wrong
yeah.
with.
What was it?
There is something wrong with
Which
that.
platonic dialogue was it in with the character who's like frustrated by his desire to look at the body, and then he finally
Yeah,
does, and he's like, "Feast eyes,"
yeah.
whatever he
It's
says.
either the Gorgias or the Republic. Where it's one of the ones when they're
Yeah,
talking about
I think it's
courage.
yeah, yeah. Um,
It's got to be the Republic.
I think it's a republic as well.
Yeah, but it's that very notion of like that kind of you shouldn't look at it, but you know you want to. But that's the whole point, is there's a disorder in the passions that's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at like, you know, when you see on the online the news feeds and stuff, and it's all like all the celebrity just BS. Like, why is my news feed full of? I don't care if this person's getting a divorce, and this person had a T-shirt that said blah blah. Like, who? I don't care. That has nothing to do with anything, right? But there's this sort of like I don't there's this uh isn't that the kind of sin of curiosity, right? Where Thomas was talking about the things that aren't for your benefit and they also don't concern you in any way. It's
Yeah, I
not
guess this could be that. Yeah.
it's not a perfection of the intellect to know them, and it's also outside of your business. And I
Yeah.
guess in a certain respect that might transfer over to even, right. So there are people, right, priests whose jobs are to deal with that side of the supernatural, and so all right, it's on, you know, they have to know about that sort of thing. For the rest of us, like that, just not it's not a perfection of my intellect to know it in that sort of detail,
Hmm.
and it ain't my business.
Can you hear voices behind me?
Yes, I can.
All right, let me shut the door. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, that good rum and coke.
All right. So, yeah, I think those are at least two worthwhile things. One is that the horror movie shouldn't elicit fear where fear ought not to be found, namely outside the film. I think that that's not helpful. At least where fear ought not to be found outside the film. If a movie was literally just like trying to teach kids not to walk across traffic or something like that, and I don't know, and it did it in a really horrific way, fine. I wouldn't show it to kids, but if that's whatever, like it's something that kids shouldn't do because they should be afraid of walking in traffic.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's one, and then the other one seems to be yeah, if it's a delight in the horrific as such.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be something, and what I mean is the grotesque, not just the fearful, but the grotesque.
Yeah.
Um, the grotesque shouldn't be delightful.
It's sort of inherent in the name.
Yeah, right,
It's
exactly.
supposed to be repulsive.
Yeah. So that's where like a movie like Saw, I think the original is a little different because it also had an additional theme. It was horrific and grotesque. Um, but the theme was about uh, life and sort of morality and how like what can be done for the sake of saving my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? At least it got people to think about those questions. Some people, many people just saw it and they were like, "Oh, wasn't that gross when that happened?" You know. But the movie itself, I didn't think was only viewable under that ratio.
Hmm.
At least if I remember it rightly. It's been a long time. Um,
I think I only ever saw that just the first one. I don't think
yeah,
I ever
I don't
saw.
think I think I may have
Anything
seen the
there was.
second one or something, but you know, it was just more that those the latter ones certainly just were all right. We got to up the ante. Let's make it more
Yeah.
grotesque. You know, that
Yeah.
was all they did. They'd already explored the theme, so there wasn't more ground to tread there.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes a body count. Like, in what kind of, yeah, more new, gross, and creative ways can we?
Right.
Like, I don't. Did you ever see? Not the original. I never saw the original. Did you see the House of Wax remake?
I don't know anything about the
Oh,
original or the new one.
I remember the. Well, I remember my dad had talked about the original, so it was a little bit older. I remember seeing the. I've seen the remake, and man, that I admit I was a little frightened watching that movie. But it's been a while. Like, it's been a long time, so I don't know that I'd remember. It probably wasn't worthwhile. It
Hmm.
probably was that, like, this is sick. You know, like some of the ways they, you know, you kill people in that movie was like, wow, that's grotesque, and you should be repulsed by that. Like, you shouldn't want to watch it again.
What
You
about
should.
Seven?
So I don't know. I really enjoyed Seven,
Yeah, I kind of did too.
but it seemed like there was something of the. It seemed like
The one
there was
on the
something of a moral message, even though it was twisted. But it was like in the twisting of morality that I kind of thought it was interesting to contemplate on.
Yeah, I guess there's a
And
little bit something more there. It was very grotesque.
it
And probably
was.
too grotesque. Maybe that's it. Didn't unnecessarily. Like I remember the vice of lust was just.
Yeah.
Thank God they actually didn't try to replicate it live, on the
Mm.
film, but they
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of told you what happened.
Hmm.
So I guess they had a little bit of sense. There was a little bit of restraint there. Um,
Actually, maybe slightly connected. Let me ask you, because I know you, like me, you enjoyed Reacher. So
mhm.
when they show you the dude like nailed up on the wall with his junk all hanging out and cut off and stuff, right? Like over the top or pertinent to the show?
Hmm.
Because they don't show you the torture part happening, so okay, but they do show you the aftermath. Or like when they see the guy in the room full of mirrors where they like killed his wife in front of him, like you don't see that, but they show you the aftermath of it.
Yeah, let me think.
Because I'll be honest, like maybe that says a lot about me. Like when that passed over me, and I was kind of like, yeah, dude on the wall. I get what they did to him.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
If for a second you're kind of like, oh, and then it's just, all right. So where are his balls now?
yeah, right. And it's like I
Uh,
get it. I get what they did to him. We move on.
yeah. I mean, it doesn't serve no purpose at all. That's I think clear in the show. Like it does have a purpose. The purpose is
Okay.
so that you understand better the character of the banker or whatever his name was, and his decisions, right? So it makes him more relatable,
Okay.
um, because that's what he saw, right? When he was trapped in the stable,
Yeah.
he had
Yeah.
to witness that. So we witness it, and it makes it a little bit more relatable. So we understand that he's not just a coward, but that there was something fearful.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's what I would say at least.
Okay. And in Seven, you don't think that furthered the story?
Yeah, it's well, maybe it does because seeing the grotesque really makes us hate the villain the same way it does the protagonist. So if they didn't, if it was less grotesque, you would not sympathize as strongly with him in the end,
Mm.
right? When he kills the villain. But granted that we've seen everything that he's seen, and that we're
Mm-hmm.
sort of new to the cop scene, the same as him.
Mm-hmm.
We're new on the beat. We understand his that he's not used to it, and we're not used to it, right? And that's why our reactions are stronger. Um, yeah, so I do think, I guess, as I reflect, that maybe it matters,
Mm.
but it is one of those things that could just be misused. You
Oh yeah.
same like Saw, you could watch it with the intent on having the discussion about the value of life and limb, literally. Um, or you could just watch it because it's grotesque and you like the grotesque.
Yeah. And so then that does seem like there would be a problem with that.
But you could watch Saving Private Ryan for the grotesque if you really wanted
Yeah.
to,
And I think I
or
would say the
Schindler's
same.
List or something.
I think I would say the same thing, right? If you're
Yeah,
drawn to the grotesque as such, like there does seem to be a problem. Like that's a disorder of the passions, I think.
yeah,
The fact that there's a whole subculture that's grown up around being attracted to the grotesque as such is maybe testament to my point. But
hmm
yeah, I would argue, yeah, in any respect, yeah, it doesn't matter what the movie or the show or whatever. Like, yeah, if you're watching Saving Private Ryan for the first 5 minutes and like that's what you get joy out of, then yeah. There's something wrong with that.
yeah. I think that's right. All right. So what are our takeaways here?
Well, I think one of the things we've mentioned is that if one, right, if you're drawn like the drawing being drawn to the grotesque as such is a disorder of the passions, and that's probably morally objectionable. there can be certain things, that you might be shown, even like fear of the unknown or whatever, where it's relevant to the story and where it's something kind of drawn in the moment. And so you've talked about maybe not taking it with you. I'm
Hmm.
still not 100% sure what that means. Although the example you gave about, not trusting your spouse anymore, like that could be a problem. Um, I don't know what you think,
Whereas like other films, like H.P. Lovecraft, I think his fear of the unknown is not.
which is a legitimate fear
Yeah,
in a certain
it's
respect.
within proportions, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't really know that it needs attention called to it the way that he does, you know. Um, but
Hmm.
maybe for some people it does. Maybe some people need to be kind of woken up that to think about that sort of possibility. Though, I mean, the truth is that his universe that he's creating is very nihilistic, where we are just an accidental wart on the
Yeah.
cosmic uh, events.
Yeah.
So that's not good or true. Um,
I mean, that
that
is
is
true, right? The universe without God, the way they've tried to construct it, it is quite terrifying.
uh, that's interesting, actually. That's a new dimension to consider it under. Yeah, what does the world look like if there is no God? Because there certainly still could be these outer gods, right? Especially if there is no God.
Yeah.
But you've got to really wonder, like, how did things get here? Are we really just a dream in the mind of whatever abomination H.P. Lovecraft
Hmm.
names? Yeah, yeah, that's good and interesting. All right, so yeah, but some movies I think are made to elicit fear in things that aren't fearful, and that it's good that they aren't fearful. Right, we don't want to be afraid of them because they will frustrate our pursuit of other goods.
Hmm.
Those movies I think are bad. Um, and then movies for the grotesque for its own sake, that can't be good or delightful, but that doesn't mean the grotesque isn't can't be utilized in horror movies like the ones we mentioned, or other movies like The Passion of the Christ, where the uh,
Mm.
very grotesque, but obviously with a point.
Hmm. Yeah. Right. Like that serves a certain purpose. Right.
Yeah. So the relation, it seems to me, between the fear that Aristotle's talking about and this fear is, I think, principally that Aristotle's fear in the tragedy is not taken with you. I think that's the whole point of and why it's such a high form of art is because whenever those passions are being elicited by the real, you're in dire straits, and so you probably won't experience those passions if you're living well. If you're having a good life, they're going to be inaccessible to you.
Mm.
At least in any sort of you know uh, profound way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you enjoy them in the theater instead, so you can still get the full range of human emotional experience without the evil being present. Um, I guess one could still take the fears present in a tragedy with you. Um, I'm trying to
Wouldn't you
think.
say that that's also in its own respect a certain disorder, where like
Maybe.
you've made it disproportionate, right?
Well,
Like
it
like the
follows.
tragic hero not being a real character, right? If this is still something that occupies your mind to like
Well,
some sort of great extent or whatever, right?
this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking
What are you
that if
talking
it
about now?
occupies your mind, it might be because you recognize a tragic flaw in yourself, your own character, and
Okay,
that might be a reasonable fear.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
I would say so.
you can make a false recognition or something like that, but um, that'd be different. That'd just be you're a
Hmm.
fool. But if you're, yeah, okay, so you take it with you, but maybe that's not necessarily bad. Or you can take it with you, but maybe that's not necessarily bad. Okay, yeah. So I think that's probably the principal difference. But the object of the fear, I know that's what Jake would say. The object of the fear is probably what the most essential difference is, and that the
Yeah.
tragic hero is fearful of falling short of his goals, um, whereas the fear that we're taking with us from uh, horror movies it's always rooted in pain or loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
is that a different object? Are we actually distinguishing two species of fear here, or no?
What are the options as we're laying them out?
Well, the tragic hero is afraid of
Some
falling short of his
sort of his
goals,
goal. Yeah.
but like, why is that fearful for him? So it's like the lack of a good, whereas the horror film introduces the privation of a good possessed,
Mm.
rather than like the loss of a good that's not yet possessed. But no, I think the tragic hero loses everything. He loses more than he started with. Right? He's supposed to start from a place of decent status so that his fall is actually more tragic. That's the way Aristotle talks about it. You don't want to start with the guy at the bottom and then he ends up at the
Oh,
bottom
oh.
still. No, he says it's
Well,
pretty
yeah, not if
clear.
he, yeah, not if he starts, not if he remains at the bottom.
Well,
Oh no,
yeah, okay. I guess he could start at the bottom, but he's at least got to,
because aren't you
at some
afraid
point.
during the story that he's going to stay at the bottom and not
No, I
climb
think
out
I think
of?
Aristotle explicitly says you want the tragic hero to be somebody.
Yeah, I didn't
So
say that you would, but
oh,
that's your point, right? Is that there's the fear that that's not going to happen,
I don't think
isn't?
in Aristotle's Poetics it is discussed that way, that it won't
All right.
happen.
I thought that was your point about that's the fear, right? Is that he's not going to meet his goal.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong then, I guess. Huh. He
Because
does
like
have
you,
goals though. Like Oedipus's goal is to
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
kill his dad and marry his mom, right? Very
yeah.
not very lofty goals, but goals, I guess, nonetheless. But I guess there is still like there's a loss of the good possessed, right? Which is his father and mother
Mm-hmm.
that he has good relationships with or something. Or he kills one and he distorts the relationship with the other one. Um, yeah, Romeo and Juliet. I guess they start out of love, and so their story follows that upward and then downward trajectory. Whereas I think Aristotle wants the story to basically just be a downward trajectory. Um,
Well, I'm not that familiar, certainly with the poetics or with even really the notion of tragedy. I kind of know like Shakespeare, right? I mean, that everybody dies. That's a tragedy, right? So that's the fear has almost been realized, right? Like the fear is that the hero isn't going to meet his goals, and yep, he didn't. Everybody died, right?
yeah,
It was
Merchant
tragic.
of Venice, Romeo and Juliet,
Mm-hmm.
um, King Lear,
Hamlet, like that's what happens, right?
Macbeth. Yeah, they're all the same. I guess I don't know enough of the old Greek tragedies to really compare. I guess that's my problem there. Um, but there is still the difference that it doesn't. I think the way those fears manifest is not in a way that at least lends itself to taking it away from the stage or the movie screen.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am not afraid that I'm going to be King Lear. I am afraid
Yeah.
for King Lear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not afraid that my love is going to be a Romeo and Juliet love. I'm afraid that their love is going to not end well.
Yeah.
These are the things that you're
That's
afraid of.
interesting. I wonder, could you say the same thing like for I think it was Scream and whatever her name was?
I'm not
Nev
afraid that
Camp.
I'm going to get murdered by Scream,
Yeah,
but
like you're afraid for them, right?
I think you could be. But I think that, and maybe this is just my subjectivity coming in, but I think that they want you to be afraid of things outside the
Yeah.
screen. Like I think Stephen King wants you to look at the drain on the side of the road and be afraid of it, you know?
Red sports cars, man.
Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
think that that's what they want. They want to take the ordinary and make it an object of fear, right?
That's
Um,
interesting. I wonder if that would be true. or if that's not the so like the drain, right? That's one thing. Like we can bring up the sports car in a second, but like so the drain, again, like the sewer, it's kind of unknown. It's dark, there's been like stuff lives down there. And it's kind of like playing with this as, hey, what if this lived down there? It's like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, but
Maybe so.
it's kind of like the fear of your spouse thing from Paranormal Activity. Like there is this
Yeah.
odd off chance that there's a monster in the sewer, but not really, and that'd be
Yeah.
irrational to be afraid of it.
Yeah,
Uh,
just like it would be irrational. It'd be irrational to hope that there are, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the sewer too, right? Like that would be
it
something
would be,
you would
yeah,
want, right? But that's also kind of an irrational thing.
yeah. That sort of imagination that follows from those types of stories, I think, are good for kids to develop as long as they grow out of it. Like thinking that the world is a big, wondrous, interesting place is good because it is a big, wondrous, interesting place, just not in the way you thought it was when you were a kid. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it and that's a good thing, I think, even if it's kind of precipitated through a noble lie.
Hmm.
At least that's my first thought on the matter.
Hmm.
But all right, enough of that.
Okay.
I think that's about all there is to say about it.
Yeah, we could probably, if we wanted, explore a little more about like the grotesque being used for some sort of moral lesson, but that would still seem to be a legitimate use of it.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think there's ultimately a question about that.
Yeah.
Like as long as what you're depicting is not something that would be in itself evil to depict. Like you do not depict pornography in order to make people
Yeah, sure.
understand that pornography is bad. Or that Netflix shows the one with the kids that was like
Oh
sexual abuse
yeah,
or whatever. That I don't remember what it was
man.
called.
Yeah, people got worked up over that one.
As I should, right? Because the actual
Yeah.
depiction itself was something that shouldn't be depicted. So that's different. Violence in itself is not ever wrong to depict because violence is just part of being alive, right? Lions eat lambs.
Hmm.
So it's not a per se evil thing to see. Whereas there are some things that need to be kept from sight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems right to me.
Are you getting these texts from Julian?
I got yeah. Let's see. What do you say? Yeah.
Dude,
Like half.
we should talk about young adult groups. I want to read a message my friend sent when he was at a young adult group. I won't tell anyone what his name is, but I just want to
Yeah.
read. Um,
I don't know. Yeah.
he said, "Here is a sample of the discussion questions from the Catholic young adult group. 1. Do you see being a part of this community as a miracle? Were
Oh my.
there doors that God very clearly opened that led you here, or was it not so obvious as to what led you here? 2. What are some of the little miracles in your everyday life? Maybe it's a meaningful interaction, a community, this one or another one, the sunrise or the sunset. 3. Is there a specific small interaction you had where you were able to hear God's voice in it, or where you were able to see the gospel shining and being lived out and shared?" These sorts of questions, I don't understand who comes up with them or who thinks anybody wants to talk about them. Like just being sort of proposed in the raw. Like I can see the types of things that are being discussed there, maybe finding a natural and organic way into a conversation somewhere when it's relevant between two people, but that's not something to help me get to know you or
Mm-hmm.
to deepen my faith. If it like I don't know, they
Yeah,
look like they came right out of a third grader's catechism
probably
CC
did.
book, you know. Yeah, it's just so disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's remarkable to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so much about it that's remarkable to me. I don't understand
Well, yeah.
so many things. Go ahead. Go ahead. You know,
I was gonna. You'd have. There's a little bit of work to be done to trace out the details, but like so, Father Lagrange, in a number of his works, in a number of his books, when he talks about, because he brings up as a repeated theme that this notion of faith, And what he sees, and I think ultimately ended up happening to the virtue of faith, it stopped being right. So we know that faith is an intellectual virtue given by grace for the perfection of the intellect to assent to truths that have been divinely revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes through a lot of the legwork, right? This is you would have to trace through this. That in liberal Protestantism and ultimately liberal Catholicism, once you erode the notion of the real and the objective and the finality of the intellect, the notion of real being, once you've butchered all that philosophy and you accept a more or less Protestantized definition of faith, not as the intellectual assent to divinely revealed truth, but to the personal sort of feeling of one's relationship with God. That's where you end up with all this kind. That's where this kind of becomes. It's about the faith journey or whatever, right? That's where a lot of that finds its grounding. And then that's when you talk about, oh, how do this the little group here? This is a miracle, and how do you feel about that? And where do there are certain things to be said. I admit, right? Admittedly, for like, where do you see God in your life? This is part of even some of the great saints when they do their spiritual writings and they talk about the examination of conscience, and they're like, yeah, go back through your day as before you go to sleep, you're making your examine, and it's like, where looking back, where did you see God's grace operative? Where did you see yourself failing to cooperate with God's grace, and so on, right? And like, there's a legitimacy to that aspect. But when you make it the sort of, let's sit around and talk about our feelings, that's a butchering of what the notion of faith is supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's a watering down, and just in these questions of the notion of faith, like you're saying, but also of miracles.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and specifically divine interaction. So the two things there, miracles. Miracles are not works of nature, and they're not just occurrences of chance. Like any act of God is not necessarily a miracle. If you want to say, when was God operative in my life today, I could say, oh, every single nanosecond. Like, great. Where does that get us? Nowhere. So it's not a helpful question. If there was something that was specifically extraordinarily fortuitous, then I'm a little more interested.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's had those moments where you're like, no way, but then God's like, Yahweh.
No.
But yeah, I'm a little more interested in that, and that goes to like sort of Dr. Oliva's thing he was researching. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna, but I'm not even sure that even something like that is right, because I could multiply examples ad nauseum, I'm sure, of something like where the coincidence is just too great, and God was still like, nah.
Okay, I know. Yeah. Okay,
right, like it's something, but it's so still like
this is always to teach you lessons, right?
And
it's not saying that God wasn't operative. It's just that he did not
right.
have what you had in mind.
He's like, I want to show you this big, huge coincidence, so I can show you something completely different.
Not completely unrelated, though.
Yeah,
a lesson through this.
Thank you for that. But well, but I kind of wonder. I get where you're coming from, but I wonder if it's not always to be found in something like the extremely fortuitous or something like that, right? There's
yeah. Well, that's why I said it's more interesting, and not that like when something fortuitous happens, ergo there is meaning. It doesn't follow, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes there is.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes there is. The other thing was what was the other thing?
Well, you had mentioned.
Oh, that was the two: miracles and divine action.
Hmm.
Yeah, and just the broader overarching thing is, I wonder to myself, who are these people, and why do they think that this is what it means to be a deeply religious person, to have a deeply religious conversation, or even like a minutely religious conversation? It's so far from the experience of me in my faith and anybody else I know who takes their faith seriously. They just laugh at these sorts of things. But I have a theory, and my theory is that 90% of people who enter ministry, and I say this as somebody who was in ministry for 7 years, are broken people who are there
Mm,
because they want faith and they don't have it, and they sort
mm,
of they have like a they kind of like look around them at who they think has faith and sort of put together a list of check boxes that they
mm,
think if they could check these boxes, it probably means they have faith because at least they're checking boxes and they see other people checking.
mm,
Um, like think how you go to like one of those retreats when you were a kid. I think adults still have retreats like this too, but you go to one of those retreats and somebody shares this like really tragic story about how God, or how something happened to them, and then like God got them through it, right?
yep.
And sometimes those could be good stories, but
Yeah. And then
um,
everyone has to share their,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So because you see, you're thinking you're there at the retreat. You're like, I want faith, and so somebody comes up to speak, and so presumably being presented as somebody worth speaking about faith, they've got the faith, and so you're thinking to yourself, all right, what boxes do I need to check to be like them? I can check
Mm,
that box. Let me
yeah.
check it real big right now for everybody to see, for me to see.
Yeah.
Um,
See, I would say there's something of a certain spiritual exhibitionism. That's also
yeah, spiritual
there's something
exhibitionism.
something wrong with that as well.
And it's like these discussions seem geared precisely towards spiritual exhibitionism. I really like that word. Um, yeah,
Thank
because
you.
that's
It's not mine.
where'd it come from.
That might also be Father Z.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know,
it's
but I
it's good.
definitely heard it somewhere else. So
I think that names the phenomenon well. Um, and it's yeah, I think it's insidious and destructive, far less than helpful. And it's just sad that so many young adult groups are like that. And it's so hard for me to believe, knowing as I do so many serious religious people, that there is such a defect in all of the ministries out there. I mean, I know there's lots of
mm,
defects in the church and there's lots of defects in me and whatever, but I mean, come on. Like, I think these young adult groups should be so simple. It's like, hey, we're gonna have holy hour, and then we're buying everybody around.
yeah,
Like,
that would actually be a lot better than what happens in most places.
I know, and it would facilitate like prayer, perhaps exposure to different kinds of prayer, and meeting other people who want faith and fellowship. It's
Yeah.
just easy. It's so stupid.
Well, I think yeah, in part, yeah. There's a lot of it that goes on. It seems to be yeah, like we were talking about. Then the root that's at that, it really is. It's a corruption of the notion of faith, and like what it is to even have like the truly religious experience, right? It's just that notion has been so overly sentimentalized in that spirit of kind of liberal Protestantism that is itself rejected, or grounded in this philosophical rejection of real objective being, right? And the encounter with God as something that's apart from oneself.
Yeah, and that let's
And
wait. Importantly, perhaps to the discussion of having a relationship with Jesus, that emphasizes the subjectivity,
mhm,
right? And not I'm not trying to say that there is no subjectivity in the life of faith, because of course
yeah,
there is.
because you
But
need a relationship with Jesus.
yes, but Jesus is the objective, right? Not the objective in the sense of the goal, but the objective in the sense that he is the real.
Yeah,
And it's not definable, but it's false things can be said about it,
yeah. It's
right?
like, well, again, to credit to the good Father, right? Jesus isn't my BFF so much as he is the just judge, right? Who, like at the end of my time, kind of holds me to that standard.
Yeah, well, at least that would sort of. 'Cause I think there is a sense in which, at least for the elect, Jesus is your BFF.
In a
But
certain respect,
yeah, it's
right?
friendship
And you do
between them
have to,
people.
yeah,
But there is
you do have
friendship.
to, yeah, you do have to know him, right? You do have to like pray with the scriptures.
Mhm.
You have to like in the Eucharist and in the teachings of the church, like you have to you have to get to know Jesus.
Yeah,
But yeah, to your point, right? He is apart from you, and he is the real. He is the standard, uh, right? And it's something that, not to be Pelagian about it, right? But you work towards in cooperation with the grace that he gives to you, right?
yeah.
And
Uh,
it's not so much a scent. It's yeah, I don't know.
well, to go back to what you said before, that not so much the BFF but the just judge. I would say yeah, like the emphasis is needs to be more on the just judge part. But I think the more important point overall is that the objectivity of who Jesus is includes both things: friendship with the elect and
Hmm.
just judge of the elect and of everyone. Right? You guarantees you're just judge. That's why maybe you start the emphasis there. But hopefully he's your BFF too. And well, if you're going to have this relationship, right, it can't begin with the subjective experience. Well, at least I say that with some hesitation, but I at least think that the emphasis is too much on the subjective rather than on the objective and our relation to it.
Hmm.
That's, I think, where we have to emphasize where the subjectivity comes in is in our relation to the objective, which the objective is unchanging, and it's me who needs to change to meet the demands of the objective, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas normally when relationship with Jesus is discussed, it's like very,
yeah. You're bringing him down to your level
yep, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're like, I
instead
want
of
to have coffee with Jesus, kind of thing.
yeah,
Which I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that sort of prayer, but
not by itself.
not by itself. But as long as it's understood that the Jesus I'm having coffee with is this objective, unchanging thing. I heard there's a really good homily we heard at school on, I guess it was yesterday,
Hmm.
where the priest said, first of all, he used the term permissive will. And immediately when he did that, I perked up. It's like, wait
All
a
right,
second. He used a
all right.
technical term.
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
good
yeah.
might
All
be
right,
coming.
all
Yeah.
right.
And then so he went on to talk about prayer. And he's like, we don't pray or petition God in order to change God or change God's will or anything like that. We pray in order that God's will be done. I was like, excellent, sort of.
Yep.
I mean, like I would add to it and say that maybe God's will is that He can grant us certain things through petition, but I just
Sure.
never hear that preached,
Yeah.
and I was so happy to hear it then because
Nice.
that really shakes up, I think,
Hmm.
that coffee with Jesus sort of mentality about it,
Hmm.
because it's irreconcilable. So anyway,
Nice.
so that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel bad for Julian.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he got himself into it. I've been to it. I've been to those things. You know, you have too. I went with you.
I went to all those ones when
Yeah,
I
you
was
went way more than me.
yeah.
You were committed. You suffered through.
All because you can't tell me that I have pursued the means to try and pursue the end. Everybody's like, "Ah, you want
Yeah.
to meet somebody? Well, you got to go to all that crap." Well, hey, I went to all that crap and they did nothing.
What a man! It's like what a.
So, and I went to
You
all the
got
crap.
you got to hope that you're going to this place where like the girl that you want to meet would never be there. but you got to hope that she's there, hoping
Doing
that
the
you'll
same
be
thing
there.
that exactly right. I want her to be there, thinking that the guy she wants to meet wouldn't be there either, and yet we both go to the thing. That's
Yeah.
what you. Yeah,
I have
maybe
heard
that's
people say things like you go to the bar and you talk to the girl who's not having fun, or whatever, the girl who's like quiet, or something
Mm.
like that, the one who doesn't really want to be there if you're really trying to. But I don't. I mean, obviously that's not a good plan. It's not a good plan, and it is frustrating for us as single, aging men that like there's not this. It'd be so easy to facilitate holy hour, happy hour, like in that order.
dude. With our
Uh,
bartending skills, we could get the happy hour
it
going.
was
Mm,
anybody could do this though. Like
this
you
is
just need
true.
a little budget. I'm gonna order at least 20 rounds from your bar every week,
Hmm.
maybe more. Can you cut me a deal? Be like, yeah, I'll give you whatever's in the well for $1 off. You're like, great. Here's your check. I'll pay for a month at once, and I'm bringing people.
Nice.
Like I don't
Yeah.
know if you could work that deal out with a bar, but like try something. Even if you can't, you literally just got to pay full price. It's not like that. The
Hmm.
church needs to make that investment. I think. Not that I'm like just blaming the church for not setting me up with a woman. That's obviously not true.
Oh no, I'm definitely blaming the church for setting me up, dude. Especially think about that whole common good arrangement and whatever. Like Like they're supposed to see to the good of it. The good of that whole exists to coordinate the good of its members. I'm
Yeah.
definitely blaming the church on that one. But
If
you know,
I,
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
no. I was slightly shifting subjects. So
I was just gonna say that if I ever have I don't think you could do this like respectably as a unmarried person. But if I was ever a married person, I would try to work on this somewhere at my local parish to help
mm,
facilitate it for other people, so they don't have to
mm,
stumble around in the dark. And
uh,
it just seems like it'd be so easy to do. It's so
uh,
frustrating that it's not done
are
anywhere.
you concerned that it would be too easily seen as self-serving if you were
Yes.
still a single
Yeah.
guy?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah. Yeah.
fine, whatever. I don't care.
I have heard of good
I
groups.
don't
Like
care.
apparently, the one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, is really good and lively.
Yeah.
So I've heard about that, but it just
Hmm.
seems like everywhere they're really just led
Yeah.
by maybe broken people or people who just don't know or don't know how to help or
Well, it's a
maybe
little
they're
bit of
just
a
like maybe
combination
they
of all
think
those
that
things.
it'd be so bad for what a bad look for Catholics to go to the pub or something. I don't know. Some people might think that.
Dude, that's literally what we do. But that was still one of
Yeah,
my.
but some people don't think that. Some people think that being Catholic is not being a guy who would live like Chesterton did. You'd be squeaky clean. Well, you should be squeaky clean, but like not
I'm working on that.
Puritans, right? We're not Puritans.
Yes.
We're Catholics.
Yeah. I'm working on the squeaky clean part, but haven't gotten there. But
All right. So,
I
what
was gonna
else?
say, well, I was gonna really quick to like slightly shift gears, but still on that theme though. Like I wonder about this. When you look around, like a couple weeks ago, I went with my boss. We went into Baltimore, and it's just nasty. I'm talking like whole buildings with I mean, all the windows blown out, graffiti everywhere. I like like this is just decrepit. Like this is the definition of a collapsing civilization.
Hmm.
And everybody talks about, like when you start talking about practically all right, like what are we going to do here? And you realize that at the end of the day, no real practical solution is going to take root unless you legitimately revitalize the spiritual well-being of your citizenry. And it's like honest to goodness, what is the church doing for true evangelism? Like how are we going out really to evangelize people? And more often than not, it's that sentimental kind of garbage that's nobody's gonna, yeah, I think we'd get a lot farther if Father exposed the Blessed Sacrament, heard confessions for an hour, and then we all went to the bar afterwards. I think that'd be a great start.
Yes.
You'd get a lot farther than some of the other things, but you still have to go out. And I wonder about that. Like you still have to go out to like these hooligans who have no job, they have no direction. They spend the day riding around on their bicycle terrorizing the locals, and it's like, all
I'm
right,
gonna just turn the camera off while I blow my nose, but I'm still listening.
all right, turn your microphone off when you blow your nose too.
I will. Go ahead.
So just in general, when I think about questions like evangelization, I mean, really, what are we doing? What do we think about, practically speaking, to further that goal of bringing the gospel to people? And I think that's how I think about it, because I still, at the end of the day, I still truly believe that if you bring the gospel to people, like it has the power to convert people on its own. I think that was like Saint Irenaeus about truth being like a lion. It just needs to be set free.
But you got
Right?
to get the
It'll
gospel right.
that's right. Again, I'm like assuming that, right? Like if you can actually bring the gospel to people, it'll do its own work. Right? Yeah, you got to get that right, and that's what I'm not seeing.
Well,
I'm
I wonder.
I'm seeing like uh, like I remember they used to have these events that were called Christ in the City, and like this inner city parish would host that. And they tried it. They had like an hour of adoration and stuff, but it was usually also accompanied by some kind of saccharine music, something like, and it's like we're kind of half in, half out, I think.
I wonder. Sorry, I get up at 5 in the morning. I wonder if so. The early church, when they're evangelizing Jews and Hellenized people, people who had at least within reach
Mm-hmm.
a fertile philosophical soil to receive the gospel.
In a certain respect. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like not everyone was a Stoic, or not everyone was a Platonist or something like that. But um, those ideas were the ideas that elites were kind of throwing around, among others that were less helpful.
Yeah.
And those kind of trickle down, as we've seen from forever, right? Whatever the elites are talking about in the universities finds its way to the bar in some elementary way.
Yeah.
Um, and our culture really lacks that. And so I think that as far as bringing the gospel to people and just assuming that it will work, there's the whole parable about the sowers in the fields, right? And I think
Yeah.
that the soil right now is particularly barren because of the
Yeah.
intellectual landscape.
Yeah, but all right. So I wonder about. I get where you're coming from, and there's certainly truth to that, because I get it, right. Like there are some. So even I'll take my examples from the scriptures, the next couple ones, right. Where even was it Paul? He's like, yeah, I saw that one slave. He was in the chariot, and he's reading the Old Testament. And so I went up to him. I'm like, hey, you know what you're reading there? It's like, let me explain this to you. Or like when he just is like, man, I'm going to bust into the nearest university there at the Acropolis, and I'm just going to start talking to people. Fine, like that's. But what about when you have some? When you have like Peter, the other apostles, when they just like, man, they just go out into the public square to the plebeians, and they're just like, man, I'm just going to start preaching,
Yeah, but I think
right?
that those plebeians had the trickle down habits of the intelligentsia of their time, which I think, as
Hmm.
I mean, Rome wasn't decadent at the time of Christ and the apostles. It became decadent by the time of Augustine. And I wonder if there were records, if you could actually measure a downward trend in evangelical success
Hmm.
as that happens. I don't know, because decadence was enjoyed
Hmm.
by the elites more
What
than
about the barbarians? The success that they had
good.
converting
Yeah,
barbarians.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. So barbarian is said in many ways, and they all would have had different cultures. But you would think that, hmm, well, where did we have the greatest success?
Actually, we seem to have had pretty decent success among all the barbarian tribes.
Yeah, we did actually. But where was it? Like,
I
where
don't
did we
know.
take it the fastest? I think I want to say actually the American continents.
Oh, I was going to go with the Goths. Earlier on, we seem to have taken all the Goth. Like we took the Gothic tribes in
But
all of
that's
Europe
relatively
long
small.
before we took the
Well, yeah,
Americans.
long
Right?
before, yeah. But I mean, like in terms of efficacy,
Hmm.
like how I'm trying to gauge how fertile the soil was, like because maybe it's pretty close actually, but like what they did was, first they break their idols by giving them science, or you could do that if you need to, I guess, but you got to break their idols, and then you show them what was true in their religion and how it was lacking in their religion and how it's
Hmm.
fulfilled in the true religion, right?
Hmm.
But there's nothing true about, or well, I guess there's got to be something, some kernel of truth in modern society, but it's a
Yeah.
lot less actually than even old paganism.
Yeah. Well,
Is
I
that
would
right?
start
Am
right.
I exaggerating?
No, I don't think so because I've the one of my priest friends talks about this too because he wonders in part like because I that we're going to have a much tougher time in any sort of re-evangelizing because like we had success with the pagans because they had a sense of religion and
Yeah,
so we could
right.
do exactly what you said, but now it almost is to a certain extent, right? I'm actually not sure if this holds anymore, but there was a time
I'm still
when it
listening.
was yeah, yeah, yeah. When it was really post-Christian, but that was the point. They'd heard the gospel already and kind of rejected it. And so you're trying to like evangelize them and they're like, "Yeah, dude, I heard this already. You're not getting like there's nothing here for me." Right? I've heard it, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, whatever. I'm out. Uh
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if we're so post-Christian and like I know a lot of people, like even people that I've talked to you about like that I watch on YouTube that I'm even kind of fans of and they even admit they're like I know not, like people they were talking to me about Christianity like I don't even know what that means or what that entails or like they literally know nothing that's the piss poor job we've been doing of evangelizing. But I still think that the culture is post-Christian, and so you're still going to get that. Like, yeah, I've heard it all before. Now we've moved past that. We're looking for the next thing,
Well, let
and
me let me
and
hover
that's
on
going to
that point you made
okay.
about religion. You said that they had religion and now they don't. And yes and no, right?
Mm,
So the gods had religion and the moderns don't, like in the strict sense. But there is still idols that need to be broken. But they're not
really?
broken through theological discourse. I think they're actually broken through philosophical. Like I think like the
Mm,
first few questions of the Prima Secundae are idol
mm,
breaking questions, you know.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I think going back to my theory about the fertility of the soil and the philosophical fertilization that needs to be there, I think that um, I wonder if evangelization, the first step is actually philosophical now. Because the breaking of idols is philosophical, but even as I say that, I'm thinking like, all right, if you worship the sun god, you have a religion on the sun god. I'm going to break your idol by showing you what the sun is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's going to be a scientific or philosophical conversation first. And I
Yeah.
think those are the kind of conversations that you would have with a pagan about the tree they worshipped or their ancestors they worship or whatever it is they worship in their religion. You're going to break that idol not by saying,
Yeah.
you guys say this, but Jesus said that. You're going to say, you say
Yeah.
this and it's wrong. And then
Yeah. I'm
then
going to
they get
chop this
fear the
tree down
gospel.
and let's see Odin try to stop me.
Yes, exactly, right.
That's,
I'll call down fire and you call down fire. You know,
yeah.
I'll sit.
Exactly. Yeah. That right. Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah, so maybe that's always been the case, and maybe the problem is just that the philosophical uh,
Well, yeah. We've lost
work
that.
is yeah, it's lost, and it's also harder to do now,
Mm-hmm.
right? To actually have a conversation with somebody now who's like pretty
Yeah.
well imbibed in modern intelligentsia, you've got to know enough about physics and things like that to be able
Well, for
to
yeah, you're
break the
actually
idols.
the first thing you have to convince them of, even beyond that, is that there's that like the physics conversation is even worth having.
Yeah,
That reality is objective, and there's nothing you can do about that. That's the first conversation you need to have, right? I mean, that's really where I think we might have the most trouble. Is like the culture not only is post Christian, post philosophical. Like I wonder if our
post
culture
science.
it's post intelligent. But I mean that I really
Yeah,
actually I mean that, right? Because the people are like look at the transgender conversation.
yeah,
This will get us yeeted
yeah,
from YouTube
yeah,
faster
yeah,
than
yeah.
anything,
That's
right?
right.
And you're like, look, research, data, consequences, but so what? This is how you feel, and it's like, what are you
Yeah,
talking? Like
yeah,
I'm
right.
like, look, you talk about trust the science. Here's the science, right? Nah, not working, right? That's racist, or actually
Well,
that's phobic.
and it is post-scientific in the way that the sort of science they would use to back up their claims are like a kid is more likely to commit suicide if he does not receive affirmative care, right? They would give you that sort of argument,
Yeah, which
which
is
is not a false argument. Like that
no.
is actually a true antecedent consequent, but it's not the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Or it was like
so
the other one I was watching. It was a short. It wasn't but it was this black chick. I'd never seen her before, but I guess she's got this channel or whatever. But it was just a short of her like talking about these people protesting for out of racism, systemic racism or whatever. And she's there, like she's recording herself. It's like, yeah, you want to talk about that, like, but did you know that even at black owned banks, black people get turned down for mortgages at a higher rate than white people. In general, white
I
people
can
get
feel
turned.
ourselves in like this
Oh,
just
I know.
this total exit trajectory from YouTube right
It's
now.
at whatever. But white people, right, at a higher rate than Asian people. Like this is, and they're all yelling at her, like, "Oh, give it sources," and she's like, "This is like, I fine, you can Google these statistics, like they're there, and but people they're not, they don't
That's
hear
such a
it."
funny post science thing too, is the sources, right? Because their education, that's what they are taught, is you write a paper and make an argument by citing sources. Like
Hmm.
there's no there's no concern about the argument constructed and whether the premises actually hold up to like common experience or anything like that.
Yeah.
And this goes to something else just that came to my mind when we were talking about physics, and it's a bit tangential, so if it's too much, let me know. But the recent guys that got the Nobel Prize this year,
Oh
um,
yeah.
they
Um,
won. Let me get it right for proving. So Einstein had a lot of problems with quantum mechanics.
that the hidden
Um,
variables didn't exist. That was I
Yeah,
remember I
or
remember reading something about that.
this one was about entanglement, but I'm
Yeah,
going
that
to get the
was
details wrong.
yeah,
So
that was what that was about.
Einstein and another guy had they basically set it up so that this would be absurd, and they showed that Einstein's uh, problem with it couldn't obtain or something like that.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, I think that in modern physics there is absurdity that people are like willing to accept and just put forward as the science. Like we talked about singularities a while back, and Einstein's initial issues with those, um, because they don't make sense. There can't be a quantum point in reality that's infinitely dense.
Yeah.
There's two reasons, right? There's no points and there's no infinite. So it makes the math work, but it doesn't matter if the math works if it's contrary to common experience. And Einstein was like able to see that clearly.
Hmm.
He still like was going to keep going with the math, to try to resolve these sorts of tensions, but he saw them as tensions that needed work. And I'm not sure how, at least to the sort of physics that trickles to me through like more popular channels, uh,
PBS.
or
PBS space time.
I got a lot of YouTube channels I follow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I watched that one among others. But that one's actually kind of critical sometimes.
Hmm.
But they they're not as interested in those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting and problematic, um, because the science became so mathematized and abstract that it doesn't matter what the real is anymore. It only matters what is true in the abstract, and the real has to be made commensurate to the abstract, rather than the
Yeah.
abstract having to be reducible back to the real, which is crazy. I think.
Yeah,
But
I think that yeah, you're right. That's an
so
accurate assessment.
so this just to pull it all the way back, I think uh, really renders the soil infertile.
Yeah.
It just contributes to the philosophical problems that need to be dealt with before you can just share the gospel and with probability of success.
Yeah.
But that's why I think it's so important to teach in high schools, um, colleges too. But like the students that we get in colleges, it's hit or miss as to if they're able to think through these problems, or if they're the type of schooling that they're used to and trained to accept is the rote memorization regurgitation model.
Yeah.
Um, and until that goes away, I don't see the philosophical problem going away, because I guess the other way you could do it is by refuting all of the experts. I guess that's actually the way it's happened historically. Um,
I suppose the problem now is like who's the experts. That means a lot of different things, right? First of all, like you and I, like maybe I'm interested in stuff like the philosophy of science. I'm actually reading, Robert Kuhn's book that he just published, or it's
mm,
2022, maybe it was earlier this year. It's like, yeah, it's like this is really cool, and I'm getting into this, and so, but I can only know physics to a certain degree.
mhm.
I can't like I don't think I could never be able to debate, you know, like any of those like the physics guys. What's that? The one guy everybody think he's like kind of Asian looking. He's got the
Oh
longer
yeah,
white
yeah,
hair, whatever his name
yeah.
is. You know what
Whatever
I'm
his
talking.
name is. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I could never get into a ring with that guy.
Right,
I can't. I don't know anything about that.
right.
Right? I can't refute that guy.
But though,
Then you
actually,
have
if he were to sit down with you, you could ask questions, and if
that's
he's a good teacher, he
true.
could at least bring you enough into the discussion where you could
Maybe
find the
so.
right questions to ask.
Yeah, and
Uh,
maybe we could have like some sort of fruitful discussion
Socrates says we don't have to know anything. We just have to be able to ask questions, right?
Yeah, I always suspected that Socrates knew a lot more than he'd let on to.
Yeah.
That's why he was able to ask some of those
Yeah, I
questions.
know.
But
Of course, of course.
but then you have like the cultural authorities that are just as like, all right, like you'll never be able to refute AOC, Kim Kardashian, any of
Yeah,
those like
they're sophists.
yeah,
They're actually beyond sophists because at least the sophists. Well, I don't know.
yeah,
Some of the
and
ones
that's
Socrates deals with, like polis, they're more like polis.
yeah.
They're gonna get angry at you. They're not
That's
gonna
the other
come
thing too
around.
is I know that I'm not witty enough to get into the ring with those people either, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
gonna spar with them that know how to do the savage clapbacks, whatever, I can't. I know that I can't do that. I just disaster any and every time, right? But if you're gonna climb into the ring with them, you got to be able to do that, right? And I lack that skill as well.
Yeah, the great meme wars have to happen.
Exact. That's kind of like that's the contemporary thing, right? The meme wars. But it's kind of like unless I don't know, unless you can, to your point, I guess, unless you can do that, I don't. Do you really think that you have to go through all that to get to fertile ground, or
Well, in the abstract, I think you do. I mean, there's going to be people that are more or less of that cloth,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, certainly people still come into the church, of course, and that's because they're
Yeah,
less of that cloth.
maybe?
Uh,
Because I
or that,
wonder,
yeah, go
like
ahead.
well, just like again, I was thinking about yesterday with the whole witchcraft thing, and it's like even if you just step back, maybe this, and you're like, all right, again, as Christianity goes down, you just see this corresponding rise in mental illness, psychoses, general societal unhealthiness. And it's like, do I really have to break all of that down to show you the correlation, or isn't there
Well, the
some respect
correlation is clear, but
in
one
which
thing
I
they,
can,
they memorized in school for their tests is that correlation doesn't equal causation.
sure, right? And I mean that's
Yeah.
true, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that right now to evangelize is just there's the church is in retreat, and it's because she doesn't have the philosophy to
Oh
deal
no,
with the state of the soil.
that's right. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned from Garrigou Lagrange is that starting from the 1890s, the philosophy just started eroding and just corrosive, dissolving of all the church's intellectual pillars to the point of its ultimate collapse.
This is actually a pretty good segue to my homeschool tutoring group, where I am just making them read the hardest things ever. Uh, they're basically going through my college level metaphysics class at a
Ooh, I
slower
like it.
pace, and they don't know it. If I told them, they'd freak out. But they're doing great. They're doing really great. Um, so the whole project is precisely the soil, though I didn't have that way of thinking about it at the time, but they want to be able to hold their ground against intelligentsia who are atheistic, right? So they want to be able to give proofs for the existence of God. I said, all right, if you want to do that, you have to know why they're going to prima facie reject your arguments. And so we got to do some philosophy of science first, at least like the problem of universals is basically what they have to understand in very great detail. And so we started with Plato. We're about to break down Platonism. Then we're going to pick up Aristotle, and then into Nietzsche, and then into Francis Bacon, and then finally the modern options with Descartes and Hume, mostly Hume. And did I mention Occam? Of course, Occam in the middle.
He's the guy that started all this.
Right. So that's their semester right now. That's really all the segue is. The question or what I was noticing, and it's hard to really get the sense of it, but we're doing the Socratic style seminar, which means they do not get answers, right? They get questions. Sometimes I have to give them more than I want to, but I try not to. So, like, there's a couple of younger kids in the group, and it's hard for me to tell if they're actually getting a little frustrated with the lack of answers, or if they're just kind of enjoying it, like they're expressing their frustration. They're like, "Oh, come on, Mr. G, just like if it is a sense of enjoyment, or if they're actually just frustrated." And I guess there's not really much to be said about it. I don't really know if there's could be a clear answer from you or anybody on this, but is there is there do you think there's a place in the Socratic dialogue where you do just pull the trigger and say, all right, I have to give up with you and tell you the truth for your own sake?
I want to say so. I mean, I kind of want to. Uh, I don't know that this is why he would have written this way or anything like that, but I kind of think that's what Aristotle does, right? Is
Well,
once
let me
like
clarify. They'd have the answers coming in texts later, but like they had the Meno problem this week. I'm not going to tell them the
hmm
answer. They actually came pretty close. One of the students, who's a bit older, um, looked at the recollection theory and said, "Is that really the only way
hmm
to resolve this?" Right?
hmm
And I was like, "Well, what do you think?" And of course, he's not going to say, "Well, maybe the knowledge of the conclusion is virtually contained in some prior knowledge." Of
yeah,
course, he's not going to get there, but he's going to get that text eventually, and it'll be really satisfying for him to finally have that.
yeah.
But is it like? Do you think that? Do you think that like the question and the answer need to be given in tandem, or is it good for them to sit and stew with the question before the next text comes?
Yeah, I would think yes. I would say that yeah, not in tandem. I think they should kind of be let to they should be let to wonder. That's the point, right?
Yeah. Okay.
That's if you really want to whet that appetite for the continued push, I think you need to let them stew for a second.
All
I
right.
don't know that I would let them stew for overly long, but
Yeah. Of course not. And there has to be somewhere in there. I it there is there's a line between wonder and frustration, right?
mhm,
You don't want them to become frustrated. Um, Maybe that's something that the student has to kind of learn to navigate, though. Um, yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe like it's okay if the students actually get frustrated because the answers will come, um, and they need to learn the patience of working through a problem, of not
is
just
it?
being able to look up an answer right away, right?
Yeah, I think that I don't. This may be a bad definition, but that kind of seemed like if I were to give you the difference between wonder and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder is the notion that there is an answer and I'm going to find it. Frustration is there has to be something that explains this and that I can't get to it. That's frustration.
Well, they can't get. I mean, they're not gonna guess virtual knowledge.
No, not that they're going to get, but like that you like he or even at a certain level of like trust. They know that Mr. G is going to like next time we're going to settle this, even if like so. All right, this is kind of fascinating. I'm wondering about because I've got no idea what the solution could be, but I know that it's like I know that Mr. G is going to give it to me next time or whatever, right? Or
Yeah,
soon or something like that. Versus that versus I guess that like that this is completely beyond the realm of being answerable or solvable.
okay,
That's
yeah,
like that's when you hit frustration and
yeah,
and that's when wonder ceases, right? You give up on something
yeah,
that you think you
yeah,
have no hope of solving.
yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll just emphasize that a bit more with them, just to make sure they're not getting frustrated. Is that
Mhm.
answers are coming? They keep asking for the answers. So more than any other class that I've had, they're like,
Yeah, just
just
yeah,
tell us. Or
yeah,
they're
and
like,
some of them need to be broken if
why did
that
we
happens.
like? So I often will like if they get close to the truth, right, but they don't
hmm
quite articulate it well, or even if they say it right, sometimes I'll just ask them a more sophistical question to see if they really
Yeah,
got it or not, you know.
yeah.
And
Well,
if
you
they
got to
can't
remind
answer
them.
it, I'll let it
Yeah,
go back to the whiteboard, you know, where they
yeah,
don't know anymore.
yeah.
And that's frustrating because sometimes they'll get to the end of class and they're like, "Wait, we said that a long time ago," and I'm like, "Yeah, but."
hmm
They don't like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, you got to remind them, like St. Paul, like when y'all were younger and as newborn children, you were just fed answers like milk. It's like, but y'all are a little older now, and you kind of gotta chew your way through something. Like
yeah,
I'll still help you with the answer, and it's coming, but you know, you got to
I
work
guess
at
I
it a little
should.
bit.
I guess when that sort of thing happens and they get the answer like, so, well, they sort of arrive at the answer early, but then they can't answer my questions about their answer, and
Mm-hmm.
then finally we come back around to it, and they're like, wait a second. I guess I should push it back on them and say, well, why
Yeah.
couldn't you defend that answer before? Why did you listen to me when I objected,
And
or not? Why couldn't you refute my objection? Something like that.
And at long last, I finally understand why Dr. Hauser's response to everyone's first answer was no. And then he went on this 20-minute bit to get right back to the answer you just gave.
But he never really,
And
at
then
least
you
I
were
don't
like,
remember him getting objections.
now I get it.
He just
Right.
kind of went to the next person, didn't he? Like, no, next, you,
Yeah, but then
yes.
but he would go around like, this whole circle until you came back to exactly what the first person said. Except now you knew why.
I guess, yeah, maybe I don't know. I don't remember specifically well enough to say if we actually articulated it better the second time through, or
No, I think it was well. At least the one story that Jake has, it was exactly the same. And the one time that I remember in class, because it was with Elliot, it was exactly the same. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's just what Elliot said 25 minutes ago, like in the exact
Wow.
words. But whatever.
Maybe I gotta watch myself. Maybe I'm falling into Hauser's old ways or something. I do think my pedagogy is largely influenced by his slap down kind of way. All right. Well, what else? It seemed like there was one or two other things, but I don't really recall.
Well, we were going to talk about paying off your debts.
Oh yeah,
and all
by
that, but
paying off our debts.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to say about that. It was more just the fruit of the continue. So, like you were asking about, like the student loan forgiveness and stuff like that at the federal level, and like, yeah, I mean, if Uncle Joe wants to just let go of all my loans, I mean, maybe I'm not going to stop him, but if there's paperwork that I have to fill out, and I think that, yeah, right. When you asked, is there something we got to do for that? There probably is.
Yeah,
I'm not
pretty
a
sure
hundred
there is.
percent. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really looked into it, but it's kind of because I was like, I've been thinking about this, and it's true, right? That in general, right? This isn't first of all behavior that you would want to encourage, right? You don't want to start forming the habit in people of you can just take out money and we're gonna forgive it, right? So in one that inculcates or kind of helps generate bad habits.
Yeah, any
Like,
dispensation does.
yeah. Secondly, it's also irresponsible and harmful in respect to the common good when you talk about the inflation of currency, the devaluation of its, when you start just forgiving wholesale, like all of these, billions of dollars of loans and things like that. So it's harmful to the common good. It's harmful to particular goods insofar as it creates this sort of irresponsible disposition in people to just kind of take money and not have to worry about paying it back. And there really is that question of justice. Like, you took out a loan, you used it for your own, like, somebody helped give you this opportunity to invest in yourself, to give yourself some sort of skill or whatever, and in general, at least that's the theory. One could argue maybe in practice but that's aside. And so you took out a loan for this purpose. I think you have a moral obligation then, injustice, to pay that back.
What if I'm scammed out of my money with a
Yeah.
false product?
Yeah. So I think you would have to allow, I think, right? Because right there, all of the terms that would have constituted the loan didn't actually exist, right? And so you do have questions of knowledge there, because like if I had known that I was right, like if I had known that this was a false product, I wouldn't have taken the loan. Um, I wouldn't have taken the loan right in the first place, and then I don't know how you would
Well, you
concretize
would
that.
lay it on the university first, right? They would be the
You
ones paying
you would
back.
you should, right?
Yeah,
Because there are certain things, well, was it within like was it within your power to know that this was a scam university or not? And maybe not. I don't
probably
know.
not. just because of the
Pro-
overwhelming,
I
like,
would say probably not.
yeah.
Right? Probably not. Generally, that's not something that would have been in the student's power of knowing that this, in fact, was a scam. Right?
There is also though like certain stats they could throw at you where like college degree educated people tend to do better than others, and
Yeah,
that's not false.
that's right.
Yeah. So,
What's the why I don't
well,
understand why
that would
we.
suggest that it's not a complete scam. That's all they would say, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, I would say
oh,
that.
look, our students make XYZ more money than
Yeah, and
GED
in general,
students.
like that's why I think you would say, right, this that the terms of the loan ordinarily would hold, right? Because if you had known, obviously, this was a scam, you wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Or are we right to call it a scam? Is what I'm saying.
Mm. Well, it wouldn't be on the part of the student.
No, not as not like the students not scamming, but the
No,
question is whether universities are running scams. Because in a way they certainly are. Like,
because it most
oh,
assuredly.
yeah, but not in every respect. If the respect is just measured in terms of how much money you're going to have before you retire, uh, you're better off at university. And obviously, the university is not guaranteeing that you're going to make, but just in
Yeah, but
general,
it's
that
true that
doesn't make
on
you better
average,
off.
somebody with a college degree is,
Yeah,
on average, better off than someone without.
right.
Right? Yeah, that doesn't hold true in every circumstance, and so yeah, there is no guarantee, but on the whole, that's true. Right? And so
Yeah.
this is why maybe I actually would. That's an interesting thing to bring up. I hadn't really thought about it before. I'll have to think about that one. So for like some of these defunct universities, like I didn't know what not MIT was it MIT ITT one of those like technical institutes just shut down, right? That's now defunct, whatever it was, right? And everybody who's got the degree it's worthless now,
Mm.
right? Or the I don't know. Can I say this on? Can I say this live? Like the former Trump University or whatever, right? That ended up just not being anything, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I would have to think about that. Is so like those guys they were the first in line to have their loans forgiven because it was like yeah you went to a what ended up being a bogus institution or a defunct institution and you didn't get what you were promised and so we'll I guess I would have to look into the terms of that a little bit more closely. On the surface, it sort of makes sense.
I
Right?
think as I'm thinking about it, like the big problem in universities right now, all the way up to med school, is that they pass students that shouldn't be passed, and that they're
Oh,
lowering the overall
yeah,
difficulty of the curriculum to widen their market.
yeah.
Um,
Not to mention all the bogus classes they offer.
yeah, even like the classes that you want to take, like the business classes, uh, they're not necessarily good.
Mm-hmm.
You're not necessarily better at business having a business degree than somebody else who just knows how to work a computer because odds are that's all you're going to be doing.
Mm.
You're going to go through the same training as the guy with the GED who also knows how to work a computer, and you're going to be able to do the same job with the same competency, provided that the guy who got the GED also scored as well on the ACT, etc. So whatever your measurement is to show that his IQ is the same, I guess I'm trying to say. If
Mm-hmm.
his IQ is the same, I don't think the business classes make a hill of beans difference. Um,
Right, like this one I saw just 2 days ago, November 5th.
what the hell?
Teaches a class on doing nothing. It's
Teaches them how to relax.
right. So here, first of all, an associate professor of religious studies. That probably tells me everything I need to know, right there. Right, how to relax and unplug. A real hunger for this among students. What class is this? Oh, Lawrence University. So I mean, literally, like these are the kind of courses that get offered. Not only, yeah. So you were talking about even the so-called like the business courses, the pre-med courses, even what should be legit, like literature, like and what should be a legitimate literature course or a philosophy course or even a science course. It still most of the time ends up just being bogus.
At least there, though, I expect there's a little bit more underneath the terms. That he's not literally just teaching nothing, but that he's teaching them like statistically why living a certain life is better than living a different life, and it's almost like an ethics class in disguise.
Hmm, that'd be interesting.
I would
I don't suspect
my
that that's
my
the case,
generous
but
read is that that's what it is, and
well,
that's given that sort of subtitle, a class on doing nothing, to
yeah,
as a
you are
marketing tool, to
you are a more
promote.
generous person than I am.
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah, right. But still, like to come back to the time. I think in general, it is a question of justice. You received something of value, and all other things being equal, right? You should pay that value back, right?
Yeah,
Just because you decided to like major in social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, like that's fine. That's your fault. But hell, I mean, look, we're philosophy majors. We deserve
right.
everything that we
Yeah,
got.
literally.
Like,
Yeah,
we deserve
yeah.
everything that happened. But still, right? I took out money to do this. I has a job now, right? I think I've rather than wait to see like because I'm in a certain respect while still doing the dissertation, I count as a grad student, and so I can defer repaying. But I think there comes a time when it's like, all right, I shouldn't just wait to see if Uncle Joe is just going to forgive all of my loans because that would not be the morally responsible thing to do,
Right.
right? I should like Gandalf would say, I should tighten my belt, and it's time to start paying that back.
And I guess if we're willing to say that universities are not scammy enough that you could be considered not
I
culpable
think
for the debt.
I think the education you get at like 99% of colleges and universities is absolutely bogus. But I think people should know that by now. It's almost common knowledge. It almost qualifies as common knowledge
But
that
even as
you go to
bogus as it
university
is,
to get your brain scrambled.
but even as bogus as it is, they still make marginally more money than not going.
Yeah, I
That's
guess that's
that's
still
that's if as long as the university can say that, then they can say they're
mhm,
offering something, no matter what they make you do for 4 years.
yeah.
As long as you end up with something to show for it at the end, and that something to show maybe nothing other than you know an extra 1K a month on your paycheck.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna say, well, that's it. And I'm sorry if that doesn't even cover your student loans across your whole life. That's
That's also part of that's the other thing too is you want to encourage prudent responsibility. And I that's we saw the
yeah,
same thing with the housing market crisis that we're kind of seeing again, right? You shouldn't loan money to people who aren't going to be able to pay it back, right? And so yeah, even if you're having a college degree is going to only earn you $1,000 extra a month, if that's not going to cover the cost of your student loan over the course of your life, you shouldn't be like you shouldn't encourage the bank to be like, hey, you can just give this loan to anybody. The federal government's got your back, right?
yeah.
That's not gonna work out, right?
So
You want to
here we
encourage responsible lending and whatever the other side of lending. You want to encourage responsibility on both sides of the lending equation.
so maybe something needs to be said is that the government has not been a responsible lender.
No,
Yeah.
but I mean that. When has the government done anything responsibly?
Well, right, but like, I just think that's important to articulate clearly
Yeah,
because it would hopefully introduce a course correction, less student loans from the federal government, and hopefully a concomitant cut in uh, university tuition costs, and hopefully a concomitant cut in university administrators, and hopefully a better university.
yeah.
You know,
Like yeah, I mean that that would be one of the things that you would see as the goal of that sort of course correction.
yeah,
And I might turn that around for. I've been trying to think of a paper. So the theme for the ACPA next year is the human person. So I want to present an economics paper under the guise of the human person.
I love how that's how ACPA topics go.
Yeah,
Today's
well,
ACPI topic is on God, and I would like to present a paper topic on dogs.
yep,
And they're like, oh, okay, yeah,
yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
sounds
Right?
great. Put that in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just love how meaningless it is. Not that you can't get an economics paper in a human person. It's just
Yeah.
funny how
Yeah. Thank you for that implication,
they're
Joe.
not they're not exactly the same thing.
Well, no, I was going to act no as actually using the human person as the framework for thinking about
Yeah, do
economics.
whatever
Like that's
stretch you
the
need. I believe in you.
See, I don't see it as a stretch at all, but whatever. All
No,
right.
it's not. I'm kidding.
Yeah, whatever. No, but it's like but that to maybe concretize the example because it doesn't count as an academic paper unless you take some stupid ass example and like follow it through the whole. So maybe student loans, maybe that'll be the lens. I worked that through
That's relevant.
since I'm not presenting a paper this year. I kind of want to present one next year.
Yeah, if it's on human person, well, when is submissions due? March.
Yeah, it's
Usually
usually
March.
like March. So I got time. So I start thinking about it now.
Yeah, so it's on human person. So I'll probably do something on international law.
Absolutely, yeah. Whatever stretch you need, Joe.
Oh gosh.
Actually, last week Evan was we were talking about capital punishment, and he's got something that could be a great paper. And I was like, dude, if you don't submit that, I'm going to plagiarize the hell out of it and submit it for you.
Yeah.
Like that would be great. And that's relevant, that's interesting, something people want to hear about.
Something about human dignity and capital punishment.
Yeah, and that it's like, kind of requires capital punishment almost. And,
oh yeah, I've heard that argument before.
Oh, not the one that he was presenting because he was actually looking at the way human dignity was used, the way John Paul II uses human dignity in his revision of the Catechism, and the way Francis used human dignity in his revision of the Catechism. And he kind of shows that there is an inherent contradiction between these notions of dignity, and kind of the exploration he did. It was really cool. I was like,
you have to do a lot of looking at how human dignity is used by these writers in other places too, though.
Yeah, sure. That's what I was like. It's like the framework for the paper is there. And I was like, yeah, you need to submit that for next ACPA. I'll do this one. Joe, you've got something on international law. We'll all meet up. We'll have our own session. We'll do our own session.
We ought to do that. Yeah.
We should do that anyway, but
yeah.
I don't know why, but
just so we can build the CV. That's it. Yeah. There's no other reason. No one cares what we have to say. I don't care what anyone else has to say. Like, I hate conferences. Like, it's so rare to get a good paper at a conference. That's
it. Most of the papers are bogus.
Yeah.
But some of them raise some interesting points or questions or whatever.
Yeah.
That happens.
It does.
That's why I was like, well, even last year, I didn't present a paper. Yes, I did. I did present a paper last year. Tells you how much I cared about that. But even still, like I still just went as vacation. I presented my paper. I went to the other, but enjoyed the cocktail parties, talked to people, hung out, stuff. I'm going to do the same thing, except without presenting the paper this year. I'm just going purely for vacation. Next year, I'd like to present something. I'd like it to be a contributed paper if I can.
Of course,
get something else published.
Are you too old for the Young Scholar Award?
I think so.
I thought it might have been 35 and under.
But there's more. There are other qualifications. I actually think that I count now as a I'm not an adjunct professor or like an assistant. Like where I am, my equivalency is like I'm a professor.
I don't remember that stipulation. I thought it was just an age thing.
It's not just an age thing. Let's see, ACPA web. Let's see what the Young Scholar thing on the. It's got to be on the website somewhere, huh?
I don't know.
Constitution, past presidents, Aquinas Medal, Executive Council. No. Graduate student funding opportunities. Here it is. ACPQ Rising Scholar Contest.
No, it's not it. It's ACPA Young Scholar Award.
Oh, all right. Then maybe I was looking at a different thing. Yeah, so the Rising Scholar, though, that's the one I'm looking, who has not attained the rank of associate professor. And I
Are
think
you considered associate professor?
I like,
Probably.
yeah, the equivalent. We're like, we don't have those titles, but I'm a full professor here.
Yeah. So.
So, or maybe
Oh,
I don't know. Maybe if it's just an age thing, I think might. I don't know. I might still count for the young scholar. I am
all
35.
you
I'll
got
be.
to do is like check a box that says "Consider me for the Young Scholar Award,"
We'll
and
see.
I think all the stipulation is on there on the
Okay.
on
Well,
the submission form.
we'll see. They would. I'd never get it.
You've only got to be the best paper in that pool among young submissions.
Yeah, still not going to happen.
Your paper
Like,
scored well when it was
and it
published.
still didn't win.
Yeah, but who won
I
that
was.
year?
It went to. Go. I guess I can say it went. That was Catherine Peters that year
Oh,
on
that was
Avocet.
Peters that year.
Yeah.
Um, Elliot almost won once as well.
I forget who won. No. I went to his paper. Who won it last year? Some young Jesuit novice. It was a mathematics paper. It was actually pretty good.
No, that wasn't last year. This was when I was in Houston.
Yeah, I know. I was saying the one last
Oh,
year
okay.
when I went because I went to that paper because it was the winner and it was really good.
Well, anyway, I gotta go to bed, man.
All right, dude.
Too
It's only
long.
10:30 where you are.
Yep.
All right.
I usually am taking Winston out at 8 with a plan to immediately hit the sack.
I got you.
So this is
All right. Well, let me go
well,
ahead. I will end our live broadcast and then we can close it out. But all right, so that'll be it for the live.